Hey everyone, thanks for checking out this video in my Master Quest series. I figured we can skip the intro and jump straight into the gameplay. Today, I want to talk about a nostalgic experience from my childhood, the dream team child that started a roller coaster franchise, Paper Mario. The game intro starts off with our main man Mario and his brother, Green Thunder, leaving to attend Princess Peach's swanky house party. As soon as the player gains control of Mario, you'll find yourself already inside of her castle. After conversing with some of the tourists and making your way upstairs, you'll immediately be ambushed by Wait. Now, who is this guy again, and why is he offering me cake with all of the nuance of a back alley drug dealer? I mean, sounds shady, I guess, but cake is cake, right? Okay, well, that was a weird interaction. I wonder if any of the other NPCs have anything to say about the— What? Well, if you saw the title card, you probably already knew what to expect, but even so, thanks for officially joining me in this video covering Paper Mario Master Quest. No joke, I've actually had this video in mind since I was first conceptualizing what videos to work on, and I've had this game in my backlog for over 2 years. Before I get into the game itself, though, I feel like I should clarify a little bit more about what Master Quest means to me, especially considering this is the third video in the series. So for those of you who may not know, the idea behind Master Quest came from the well-known Ocarina of Time GameCube port known by the same name, Ocarina of Time Master Quest. The goal of the game was to give players an alternate, more challenging version of Ocarina of Time. The game was identical to its base version, except for the dungeons, which all had different, usually more challenging, layouts, puzzles, and enemies. The original concept was conceived to provide a fresh experience geared towards veterans familiar with the base game. So why did I bring that up now? Well, Ocarina of Time is the only official Master Quest release, but the concept lives on spiritually in many games, and in regards to today's game, physically as well. Thanks to a bunch of creators named Emperor Thams, Rainshoes, Ja the Player, and Brotenko, we have an unofficial mod of the original Paper Mario called, shocker, Paper Mario Master Quest. Now, full disclaimer, the original mod is absolutely embracing the challenge aspect of Master Quest, and I strongly urge you to follow the advice listed on their GitHub page, of which I'll include a download link below. If you're lacking a little bit of confidence in your paper-thin plumbing, there's an adjusted version called Paper Mario Master Quest Jr., which is listed as having a more lenient difficulty curve and is recommended for any less challenge-inclined types. I am not very good at the Vidya, so this is going to be the version that I play. While I can enjoy games that are challenging, I don't like playing games solely for the challenge. I like immersion, and when I look for definitive versions of a game, I'm also looking for that same level of immersion, as well as fresh takes on things, new content, rebalances, etc. Things that bring a spark of adventure back into a classic tale. Thankfully, Paper Mario Master Quest isn't just an enemy rebalancer. Per their listed description, there are a bunch of new map areas, and existing map revamps, badge and item rebalances and changes to partner skills, and a lot more. Let's start off with the story. For any fans of the original Paper Mario, the story is virtually unchanged in Master Quest, although the wise Merlin family has been replaced by the Mafia. For those unfamiliar with the original story, it's a fairly classic take on Mario tropes by today's standards. Bowser kidnaps Peach, and now it's up to Mario and his new friends to save the day. However, following the theme set by Legend of the Seven Stars, creatures previously known as Bowser's minions now have personalities and civilizations separate from the Koopa King. Mario will even join forces with some of these friendly denizens. Goombas, Koopas, Lakitus, Boos, and more fill this world and give it a rich and distinct personality. Mario will quest with his entourage to save the Seven Star Spirits to thwart Bowser's evil plan and save the princess. But then, if the story isn't changed, how do all of these changes really take place? Well, much like Ocarina of Time Master Quest, these changes are gameplay-centric. As Mario explores the world, the player will organically encounter the new and changed features. Badges are in different places, and some locations look radically different. As a quick note, I'll try to avoid covering a lot of the new content beyond the surface level to reduce spoiling anything for people who want to try out this mod for themselves. For starters, the player will start out with the Lucky Star already in their inventory, where normally it isn't retrieved until after completing the prologue and reaching the Shooting Star Summit for the first time. This particular item is what allows Mario to use action commands, and is a great change that accelerates the pace of the early game, where normally it can be pretty slow. Naturally then, you can expect some changes in difficulty in the opening boss of the prologue with the additional actions at your disposal. The red and blue Goombas, for example, do not have their reduced HP totals during the king fight like in the base game. The way the enemies act and react, and how the first boss environment is set up is a pretty good indicator of what you'll find as you progress through the game. Early on, important fights will usually add an extra enemy or two to cause the player to strategize more, in the place of overbuffing the boss itself directly. You'll also find seemingly small changes to things as out of the way as the shops themselves, such as the first Toad Town store selling eggs, and the second one selling cake mix before Chapter 4. I strongly encourage using the shops to your advantage as you progress through the game, as the increased difficulty will definitely warrant having multiple healing and attack items on hand, though both the single and multi-target lightning attack items have seen a major rework. A lot of choices were made to finer gameplay too. Since badges have been moved around and reworked, the early game feels a lot different in how the player would normally approach those challenges. Strategies that could be used to smash the game in half, like danger or peril strats, power bouncing, etc., have been tweaked or made difficult to pull off, frankly, if not just outright impossible. For instance, fans of the base game may know that power bounce actually has a max bounce threshold, and in Master Quest this threshold was adjusted for bosses. On top of that, many bosses have attacks or techniques, such as moves that attack multiple times, to break danger or peril strats. Many enemies in general just deal more damage across the board, but I'll cover that a little bit more when I go in depth on the challenge scaling in general. Before that though, let's look at some of the other new changes. One of my favorite additions are the new map connecting areas, two specifically. The first is an area north of Dry Desert, which adds a connecting cliff to Gusty Gulch. The second is a huge area east of Shooting Star Summit, which is almost an entire zone in of itself with all new exclusive enemies. This area connects to Shiver City later on. These areas are fantastic additions, as not only do they both add something new to explore, they also provide additional accessibility to areas that work within the confines of the lore. In the map, Gusty Gulch sits right above the desert, so having a connecting cliff just feels right. And the Shooting Star Path is a cool zone that didn't get nearly enough attention in the base game, considering how characters from the Shiver City region visit the rest of the kingdom, and vice versa. The additional path connecting the two makes almost too much sense. I mean, the only other way to get to the Shiver City was through a pipe in the sewers, so I don't know. A lot of thought went into these connecting areas, and I really appreciate stuff like this. But of course, these aren't the only new areas. There's entirely new areas too. In the new Shooting Star Path is the also new Star Temple, which houses boss rematches at souped up difficulties fitting for the endgame. There are sweeping camera angles and a lot of fantastic little details that really make this place feel right at home in the greater world. Though possibly the single biggest addition is a certain tomb at the fringe of the world. Fans of the Paper Mario franchise are most likely aware of a certain concept called the Pit of 100 Trials, first introduced in Paper Mario The Thousand Year Door. That is, the first Paper Mario game didn't have a Pit of 100 Trials of its own, until now. This dark, musty tomb isn't just a Pit of 100 Trials either though. Come back near the end of the story and you'll find yourself in a full-length additional dungeon with its own unique set of puzzles, brand new enemies, fun extra lore, and a final soul-crushing challenge. The concepts at play here are really interesting and well thought out. I mean, even where everything is located is so well done too. That big field at the beginning always felt like it was hiding a huge secret. As a final neat note, all of those new areas, including the map connecting areas discussed just a little bit ago, all have unique and generally consistently well written and character aligned text from Goombario's field ability. Fun to explore and read if you're a lore head like I am. Now, as mentioned a few times previously, the primary purpose of Paper Mario Master Quest, and the bulk of all of those changes, are all made to increase the challenge of the game. Enemies and bosses have more HP and more attack power across the board. There are many new enemies, including more difficult palette swaps, and even some brand new enemies that may look familiar to series veterans. There are plenty of new enemy formations, and loads of new attacks and battle mechanics that makes every fight feel more challenging and engaging. Now, this level of difficulty is why I myself chose the junior version of Paper Mario Master Quest. The challenge is very real. Even with the more lenient difficulty curve, you can still expect some hefty resistance. As you progress further and further through the game, get comfortable with seeing the game over screen. It'll probably happen more than you expect on your first romp through. One huge takeaway here is using your action commands. In the base game of Paper Mario, you could reasonably miss a lot of, if not all of, the action commands. The game itself seemed to be built around the lack of them, with the action commands themselves being a way to make fights faster, easier, or both. The action command is much more integral, even vital to the gameplay in Paper Mario Master Quest. For those of you who are unfamiliar, the action command is basically a player engagement tool, so instead of just pushing the attack button or defend button, you actually have to time an A button press or some other action with the technique that you're doing in order to maximize your damage output. Now, in the game, if your partner ever took damage, they'd be stunned for turns equal to the damage they took. Landing an action command guard prevents your partner from taking any damage at all. That said, there were very, very few attacks that would actually hit partners, and if they ever did take a hit, you would generally have plenty of time to react and recover. This is absolutely not the case in Master Quest. Flubbing a command that hits your partner will almost always be dire. Additionally, many enemies now have attacks that can hit both party members and will sometimes deliberately target your partner directly. Bosses that can attack partners have no chill, no grace periods while your partner is down. They'll often even attack them again the moment you regain control of them. Another uncommon element in the base game was status effects. Though they were definitely present, they were easy to recover from and definitely not a deal breaker if you got afflicted by one. There's not a way to passively prevent status effects in the game, like in the way of badges, so the only way to prevent a status effect from an attack is to nail the action command guard. Later bosses and enemies will almost always be able to inflict a status ailment. When Mario is stunned by an ailment, he can't guard and loses his turn. Just like with partner attacks, there's little to no leniency in Master Quest. You must be able to land your guard to prevent status effects later on, or Mario's just going to keep getting afflicted. These are two extremely important factors for many fights in Master Quest, to the point of where some attacks can both hit your partner and inflict a status ailment. If you fumble a guard, it will be incredibly difficult, honestly, if not impossible, to recover. Case in point, the boss of Chapter 5 was my first major roadblock, because during its second phase, it would attack every single turn, and its attack always hits both Mario and the party member. The damage output was incredibly high, and the first attack destroys every item in your inventory. You don't have any reliable means of healing outside of items at this point. The healing star power that you get is unlocked after you finish this fight, meaning the only way you're winning this battle of attrition is to land your guards and keep your partner standing so you can burn down the boss's relatively low HP total before it burns you. You are basically presented with a challenge that can only be beaten by getting good. I struggled with the timing so much that I gave up trying to guard Mario at all and just hit the guard command right after Mario took the hit, since that was easier for me to mentally grasp. Once I got that down, the fight was actually much easier. So, with that in mind, I have a few thoughts on this system. There were definitely cases of get good in this game. You can't brute force your way through most fights, and fights where the action command is a necessity were engaging, and for the most part, understandable and fair. However, there were a couple design choices I was not a fan of. Like I mentioned early on, I do not mind a challenge. Generally, if I'm getting frustrated, it's not from the actual difficulty, it's more from time being wasted and needing subsequent attempts, or what I consider FUs to players. Basically, things that cross the line from challenging to just being downright unfair. I personally think there were a couple of those issues present. The Chapter 5 and 7 bosses definitely laid on the skill side of the spectrum, but the Chapter 6 boss, man, I don't know. I knew what to expect for the boss's big charge-up attack, and I changed my tactical approach to prioritize burning it down as opposed to conserving energy, and I had a much easier time afterwards. But it took me a handful of attempts, around almost 20 to 30 minutes apiece before I could really hit that strategy. Even by JRPG standards, that's a long time for a boss fight, and that's still hours away from the final boss too. I felt like this was a turning point in the game. Here and onwards, the game kind of felt like it favored absurd damage output attacks and generally unfair situations for the player. A good example of what I mean by generally unfair is a new encounter exclusive to the Master Quest version that occurs right when you get the final jump upgrade. The damage output from the fight just feels way too high. The encounter takes place before you get access to the much more powerful healing items. For example, the strongest healing item you can buy at this point in the game gives you 20 HP, where later on in the next chapter, you'll get access to a store that sells items that heal 50 HP. The Zap Tap badge is practically required for this fight, but there's also practically no indication you need it. Goombario's tattle hints at it, but that's after you're already in the fight. It's also only available for 20 star pieces, so if you just happen to have collected all the pieces you could before this point, I mean, I don't know, start a new save file, I guess? I had to have it for my strategy, and I spent all my star pieces before trying this battle out first, so I had to stop and go collect like 20 more from around the world. Not only that, it feels like this battle requires luck. Like, I could not find a way to keep up with the damage output without using the timeout star power, which I believe has only a 60% chance of affecting each enemy. I wanted to play the game as authentically as possible without save states, but I just got tired of trekking all the way through the mini rooms on my way here following each game over, until I finally caved and just kept retrying the fight until I got a perfect turn 1 timeout, which stunned all 3 enemies, and then I save stated on that turn to keep trying out different tactics until I just barely squeezed out a victory. Really, there may have been a better way. Hell, there probably is a better way, but damn if it didn't feel like luck was a required component to beat that fight. Just as a heads up, there's some spoilers and a minor rant incoming. Okay, and the game's final boss. Okay, so I get that landing action commands is important here, and I admit I've flubbed a lot of them, okay? But like, look at this. I carefully and methodically played this fight for 45 minutes, and I got the flow of the fight down pat, and then the boss does this garbage. For context, the max player HP, without badges, is 50. Normally, the boss will use this turn to go invincible and do no other actions. You have to use an action on Mario's turn to remove the boss's invincibility. Here, the boss both goes invincible and deals 50 damage in a single turn. Even if you survive, you still have to use Mario's next turn to remove the invincibility, and only Mario can use items or star powers to heal. Boss phase changes aren't a new concept, I get that, but there was no build up to this particular action. If it had even been just another regular attack following the boss's repertoire, but he just combined them together, that would have been a lot more palatable. But randomly after a long fight and 200 plus HP damage, the boss pulls out this middle finger move with zero indication to be looking out for it. It's a trap deliberately designed to defeat new players who aren't prepared. I just closed the game at that point. I was already thinking of counter strategies and ways to better play. Based on sheer numbers, I know it's possible to beat him. I mean, I had no defense boosts on, no damage guards. I actually had a defense down badge to give me 1 more power and trade off for that less defense. And I know I could have landed my guards better, but it felt like that specific decision was designed to waste the player's time. And look, I couldn't be bothered to try it again. Getting that far was enough of the experience for me. So I guess you can tell I wasn't a fan of the difficulty choices on some places. Beating a tough boss with a good strategy definitely feels rewarding, but strategies that rely on luck or a previously non-essential item without feedback, or those middle finger tactics with that teleports behind you nothing personnel energy just suck the life out of me. Like maybe it would have been more bearable if an NPC in the sewers said, hey, there's an incredibly tough monster roaming around and a way to electrify yourself would be helpful to have, or Goombario's tattle on the last boss even said, hey, look out, I feel like he'll pull out some crazy desperation attack with the Star Rod when he gets low on HP. Although, frankly, the 2 for 1 on that attack is still too much even with forewarning, I think. Now, the game was fun to play overall, but I definitely got a little more frustrated towards the end, and those specific scenarios give me a really sour taste in my mouth. I think I may have misunderstood Master Quest Jr. to be easier across the board from beginning to end, but I think maybe it's just the difficulty curve that is adjusted, whereas the bosses at the end of the game are relatively the same difficulty as standard Master Quest. Would I recommend playing it though? That's kind of a tough one. For gameplay balance, world additions, and all of the new content alone, I would absolutely say yes, 100%. The first 4 chapters were a lot of fun to play through. I definitely felt the challenge ramp up in Chapter 5 though, and by the end of Chapter 8, I was kind of rolling my eyes at forced encounters and running away from everything else. Experience gains are greatly diminished across the board, which is totally fine and makes sense in the level scheme of the game. I was just mentioning that I was running from battles not as a contributor to the game's difficulty, but just to avoid the tedium. Even in spite of some of the more curious gameplay decisions, I would still suggest any fan of the original to try out at least Master Quest Jr. The changes are imaginative and refreshing, and I still got a lot of good time out of it. Now, would I say this is the definitive way to play the game? That's a much harder question. For the challenge runner and sadists out there, yeah, by all means. For the casual player, I don't think so. The world changes are fantastic, and quality of life stuff is amazing, but I think the frustration from some of those fights can genuinely sour the whole experience. If the devs had a version of the changes with no difficulty spike, or even a more modest one to be inclusive to everyone, then absolutely. Maybe like a badge you can get at the beginning to have the damage Mario takes. Also, for the love of any deity, add the first or bump attack badges back in and just disable them in the Pit of 100 Trials TTYD style. The random encounters got so irritating later, especially when you don't get any experience from them at all anymore. And if they are in the game, I don't know, maybe make them a little bit more accessible or something, but I didn't find them in my full run through. But keep in mind, at the end of the day, this game was not designed to be inclusive. It was designed primarily as a challenge run for veterans, and the additional features feel more akin to extras than the primary intent of the ROM hack. I say, even if I don't recommend it as the definitive version, that you should still give it a try. Regardless of the things that I thought were negative aspects, I can still feel all of the care and effort put into this game, and I want to really stress that I did still enjoy my experience overall. Totally unrelated note, but I had to mention, this interaction with Junior Troopa had me rolling like shapes, dude, my sides. If you're a fan of the original, try it out and let me know what you think. Have you played this ROM hack or any other difficulty increasing ones? What are your thoughts? Am I just lacking in good and need to go get more? Feel free to let me know how bad I am at a fan-made creation down in the comments, and thanks for sticking around this far. The support has been really great. Next time, I'm actually covering a game that was requested by one of my viewers, one I've actually never played before, so keep an eye out for that. Lastly, I've been really enjoying working on the Master Quest series, but I've been avoiding big game franchises because of the time commitment associated with them. That said, I think if I can get up to 100 subscribers, I'll tackle the entirety of the mainline Persona series and their definitive versions here on the channel. If that's something you'd be interested in, join the channel and click that bell to let me know. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.